Welcome to the re-recording of the Shir and Avodas HaParsha that took place in wonderful Kehillah of Ner Avram and beautiful Shari Chesed Yerushalayim last night. And as this happened before, I missed setting up one of the aspects of the sound recording. So that must be that Min HaShamayim, we were meant to do a bit of Chazara on the Shir, and hopefully it will come out better than it did the first time. When we enter Sefer Vayikra in the world of Korbanos, so we discover many technicalities, incredible amounts of technicalities in terms of the different Korbanos that are brought. I often refer to the Kuzari, who in his discussions in the Sefer, where the Jewish Chacham is discussing the Torah with the king of the Khazars, he actually brings this as an example of the fact that it's clear that Torah came to Am Yisrael min hashamayim, and it was not designed by human beings. Because even if you would say that human beings sometimes come up with the idea of a sacrifice, but the incredible amount of intricate details that we find really elaborated in Seder Kodshim, in the Mishnayos, in the Gemaras, and even in the Psukim themselves that we have in these Parshas, are nothing that any human being could or would have thought of when we see the details of what type of animal each korban should be, or what type of vegetable, right? If it's mincha or nesachim of wine, where it has to be processed, on what side of the mizbeach, can be eaten for which amount of time, where the dam is brought. All these intricate details show that we're dealing with spiritual engineering, with spiritual reality. Just as the intricate details of the Mishkan that we learned in these past Parshas were not simply arts and crafts, but we're creating a spiritual reality, so too the world of our Korbanos. Now, it's important to try to see in the Psukim where we get some instruction as to how to prepare ourselves in the world of Ruchnis, of spirituality, before the actual technical bringing of the Korban. We know that the Kavanah, the intention of the Korban, is very key. The Nevi'im certainly criticize Am Yisrael for bringing Korbanos without intention or the wrong intention. The famous line, Ma li zivchechem, that Hashem says to people who are coming with the wrong intentions, with contradictory behavior, why do I need your sacrifices? There are isurim of pigul, of when a korban is shechted, having in mind to eat the korban in the wrong place or in the wrong time. But deeper than all is really the approach that's necessary for the korban to be effective, to be sholem, to be as it's meant to be. So many Mefarshim find a lot of instruction in the second pasuk of this parsha. Daber o bnei Yisrael, speak to Am Yisrael, v'amarta aleim, and should say to them, Adam ki yakriv mikem korban la'Hashem, min ha'behema, min ha'bakar, min ha'tzon, takrivos korbanchem. So they pick up on the idea that the word used is Adam, right? Adam ki yakriv mikem, and it goes from singular to plural. Adam singular, ki yakriv mikem, from you plural, and it finishes takrivu es korbanchem, again plural. So let's look at some of the treasures that are brought out from these diukim, from these examinations of the language of the pasuk. The Orach L'Chaim, who was a Talmud of the Maggid of Mezrich, says the following: Lifnei kol mitzvah, before any mitzvah that a person does, tzrichim lekabel mitzvahs v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You have to accept upon yourself first the mitzvah of loving every Jew as you love yourself. And he points to the Arizal's Takana, which you can find in some Sidurim, that it says before davening, you should accept upon yourself the idea of Ahavta l'recha kamocha. And he explains why this is so important. He says, because Kol echad miYisrael, every member of Am Yisrael, yesh lo maila miyuchedet lo la'atzmo. He has some particular advantage, some particular good aspect of himself that is uniquely his. That is not found among other members of Am Yisrael. And we want to be able to connect to that, to be able to bring that as part of what we do when we bring our korban. Because realize, the korban has in it the root karov, to try to get close to Hashem. And really, all of our mitzvahs, the Zohar Kodesh calls them tayag, eating, 613 eitzahs, instructions that teach us how to get close to Hashem. So when you do that, you want to be able to have all these powers, the collective powers of all the individuals of Am Yisrael, to enable you to get close to Hashem. He says, so ha'etzah, the recommendation is, she is kasher in klolos Yisrael. Adam, an individual, is bringing kiyakriv mikem. He should bring it as part of Am Yisrael, because the bichlolus Yisrael yeshes kol ha'maylos sheba'olam. When you look at Klal Yisrael, among them, from individual to individual to individual, you have all of these wonderful advantages that are conceivable in the world. So this is the first step, he says, Adam kiyakriv mikem, that you must do it with this connection. So too the Panim Yofos is also the author of the Haflah and on Ksuvos and the Sefer HaMakne on Kiddushin. He says when a person comes to bring a Korban, he says, "Uratzono v'chefzo lahakriv korbano b'shleimus haroi." A person wants the korban to be complete, to be whole, as it should be. She's kasher in Klal Yisrael. You must connect yourself to Klal Yisrael. And again, even if we don't have the actual technical korbanos now, certainly tefillah is also part of that amud of Avoda, of Avodas Hashem. But also all mitzvahs, as we said, are an act of trying to draw close to Hashem. And therefore, that must be done with the person not approaching as himself, but as part of Klal Yisrael and on behalf of Klal Yisrael. Again, we find it in many mitzvahs where we say that we do the mitzvah b'shem Kol Yisrael, in the name of all of Am Yisrael. Also, the Panim Yofos brings another aspect of this. He starts in the name of the Al Shich HaKadosh. He says that when a Jew does a chet, not every korban comes as a result of a chet, some do. And when a Jew sins and he has to bring a korban to get atonement, so he says, really, it's not just him that needs that atonement. Kol Am Yisrael chayovim gam ken al oso chet mitzad arvus. All of Am Yisrael are obligated to repair the damage done by that chet because of the principle of arvus. Kol Yisrael arevim zelozeh. All of Am Yisrael are responsible for each other, right? The word arev we find used in halacha, and nowadays even in modern contracts, this idea of like a cosigner who takes responsibility, let's say on a loan, that if the person who takes the loan doesn't repay the money in time, so he's responsible for the loan. So a Jew is never someone who stands alone. And therefore, all of us need this. So when a person brings his korban, Adam kiyakriv mikem, he should include it, the idea of that culpability, so to speak, of all Am Yisrael that needs to be repaired through that korban. And have in mind that I'm not just looking for my own kapara, but for that of all of Am Yisrael. The Tifer Shlomo of Radomsk brings another aspect to the idea of Avodas Hashem. A korban is something which is a great step to take, to come to the Beis Hamikdash and to say, I'm going to draw close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And oftentimes, and we all experience this usually at some point or another, a person feels, who am I to do this and what will it accomplish? A person feels empty, totally empty, what he calls reik mikol v'chol. And he has feelings of despair, saying, okay, I can do this mitzvah. What's the point? What's the benefit that's going to come from it? Is it really going to be able to change anything with my situation and who I am? So he says that's clearly not correct. It's important for a person to be humble, what we call shiflus, but you also need his chazkus, you need strength, and you need simcha, you need joy. We find this in the world of the military, for sure, where the idea of morale is so important. And Rabbonim Pershischa said, in Yiddish he said, verliert min courage, if a person loses courage, verliert alles. You've lost everything. So the person has to have this. So where are you supposed to draw it from? So he says, look at the continuation of the pasuk. mina behema, right? You bring the korban, can be from a behema, meaning an animal like the domesticated animals as a class, minat bakar, minat son. It can be an ox, it can be a sheep. So what are we supposed to learn from that? He says, first of all, you have to realize that a behema has limited significance in this world. All of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's creations are wonderful and important, but you have a cow. It's not a human being. It's an animal that has its particular purpose in the world. Comes a Jew, any Jew, and declares that this will now be an olah. Suddenly that animal is transformed. Suddenly a new set of halachas apply to it, specifically for that type of korban, whether it's an olah, whether it's a chatas, whether it's an asham, that this Jew applied to it by his words. The fact that you are able to do that should show you that you're never lost, that you still have inside yourself the integral power of a Jew to transform the world. So if you can do that, right? So just with that declaration, he says a Jew should think, words of Torah, words of tefillah that I say, how much more can I change and transform? And this should give you the strength needed to take the step forward and to go forward with your Avodas Hashem. Now the Racham Strifka Rebbe, who brings this down from the Tiferes Shlomo, Racham Strifka Rebbe from America, Tzaddik Livrocha, he says, a lot of times it's hard for us to believe that our words have such power because we don't feel anything. We may daven, we don't feel that we've been transformed. He says, again, learn a lesson from that animal. When the Jew comes over to that sheep and says, you are now Korban X, you are dedicated to be that Korban. If we could interview the sheep and say, do you feel any differently now? The sheep would probably say, like, nah, not really. The sheep doesn't have the capability of sensing that difference. We don't see it acting differently. Nonetheless, it is entirely different from the other sheep in the flock. So too, he says, we have to believe in the power of our words of Torah and Tefillah, that they're transformative. And the fact that we don't feel it doesn't change the truth of what it does. Now, it's interesting that this topic comes up related specifically to Pesach. Pesach is this once-a-year event, which is very, very powerful. It's meant to be viewed almost as an injection that every Jew must receive to continue on through the year. And it's supposed to free us from so many things and dedicate us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And many people who've been keeping Pesach and the Leil HaSeder for many years say, I do it. I don't really feel that different. So this was addressed by Rav Yosef Yehuda Leib Bloch Zatzal, the Telzer Rosh Hashiva, in his Sefer Shirei Das. And he differentiates between what he calls external emotions and internal emotions. External emotions are more easily aroused. External emotions can be when something happens that gets us very angry or very emotional, very worked up about something. But what really transforms us, he says, are the world of the deep internal emotions. Now, the problem is if you do something externally that awakens those external emotions, oftentimes nothing is left to come to the internal emotions. He gives the mashal of a man who's in a house someplace and he's very hungry and you want to bring him food. The problem is that there are many rats in that house. And if you wake up the rats, they're going to come and eat the food. So he says you have to go through very quietly through the house till you get to that room where the person is, and then he can be nourished by the food. People sometimes think I could design a Leil HaSeder that's much more effective than Torah's Leil HaSeder. For freedom, what do? We lean a bit and we eat some matzah. For Morah, remembering the suffering, we eat some lettuce. Right? Couldn't we make, especially nowadays with our technology, a 3D multimedia display of the slavery in Mitzrayim and the Makos coming and have all sorts of things like that? And it would interest people and could do it new and differently every year. The answer is that that's true. That may arouse those external emotions. But the Torah is designed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who designed us And every mitzvah in the Torah is designed to get exactly where it's supposed to get inside of you and to change you and transform you, even if you don't feel it. Perhaps we can look at two examples. A person could be walking along the road in the winter, it's pouring rain, and he's walking next to a big muddy puddle, and suddenly he hears a car revving its engine behind him, and it zooms past him, hits that puddle, and splashes it all over him. Now, you'd probably be burning with anger. You may shout a few things at the car as it zooms off into the distance, but that event won't really be something that transformed you in life, for the positive or the negative. Oftentimes, it's something painful that was said by someone close to us, a small word, a small action that affects us so greatly. Al tzad tov, on the good side, right? One word of encouragement sometime, of appreciation, totally transforms us. Rav Godel Eisner, the Mashgiach of the Ger Yeshiva in Tel Aviv, who had been through the concentration camps for, I believe it was about 4 years, he said that at one point they were getting marched from one place to another, and the Nazis were there, and if you wouldn't keep walking, so they would shoot you. And he felt his strength draining out of him, and he thought that it's time to sit down, and what will happen will happen. And suddenly a friend came running by, and he saw Rav Godel had stopped, and he yelled at him, and he said, "Godel läuft, Godel run." He said, and I started to run. And that word from my friend saved my life and was a root of all the years and everything I did since then. So these small words can do so much. Therefore, says the Tiferet Shlomo, right? We have to learn from this the power of what we're able to do. Another aspect. Odom ki yakriv mikem. So Rashi points out from Chazal that Odom harishon hikriv min hagezel. The word Odom as opposed to Ish is a reference to Adam Harishon. Adam Harishon had a unique status in the world that he couldn't steal. It was all given over to him. So we say, just as he didn't bring from something stolen, so too you shouldn't bring something stolen. Now, this is a halacha that applies in a variety of places, right? The question of mitzvah ba'avera, with something that's stolen. We know there's a famous parak in Maseches Sukkah, lulav hagazol, the stolen lulav. And each thing's dealt with in its own case. But here, there's something particular about when you're coming to do it in Avodas Hashem. Let's look at a couple of approaches to it. The Chavetz Chaim brings down the following. He says that Rabbeinu B'chai brings this medrash, and he applies it to it also, the pasuk in Yeshayahu, Ani Hashem sonei gezel ba'olah. It says, I Hashem hate theft, which is brought as a korban olah. There's some Mefarshim who talk about why that says specifically the korban olah out of all of them. So the Chavetz Chaim wants us to understand. He says, come and see that the hashkafa, the outlook of the Torah, is often not the way we would look at it. Let's imagine two wealthy Jews, both of whom earned their money through means that were not so good. They were dishonest, they cheated people, they were deceptive, and they became very wealthy. One of them has a heart of stone. He's stingy. He keeps his money to himself. All those ill-earned gains are things that he won't donate to any of the community causes, not to the shul, not to the mikveh, not to the yeshiva, not to the most chitim fund for Pesach, nothing. You have another Jew who also became wealthy through those means, and he is a giver, right? His name is on every project in the town, the Bate Medrash, the mikveh, right? The schools, the yeshivas, all these different things. Now he says, how would we look at this? He said, we would usually, first of all, be more forgiving toward the second one. Because it's true, he is dishonest and he's a robber, but at least he gives to good things. And the first one we would look at much more harshly, right? You, right? Not only do you steal, you don't even donate to anything good. He said we would also sometimes even end up giving that one who donates kavod. honor for what he's done. He says here the Torah reveals a very different hashkafa. He says the Torah says that the damage of the one who donates to those good causes, right, is greater than the one who steals but doesn't donate. Because by those donations, he says, we lose so much more than we would gain from such a donation, because he undermines, he said, the very bases of tzedek, of righteousness and mishpat and justice that are the basis of the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, tzedek, we say tzedek u'mishpat b'chon kisecha. Tzedek and mishpat are the foundation of Hashem's throne in the world. So what you do here is you're actually showing people that these things can be laundered, so to speak. That it's okay to steal as long as you, so to speak, pay your dues by donating to all these different things. This will encourage other people to do it. This will stop the natural, right, reaction that a Jew has toward the idea of stealing, like the brothers of Yosef, who said, Chalila, Avadecha, right? Chalila, we would never do such a thing, to steal. And therefore, he says, it will actually increase those things. And therefore, Hashem says, as Yishayahu brings it, Ani Hashem sonei gezel ba'olah. I hate the idea of theft when it comes to bringing a korban. Let's go back to this concept that the korban means to try to get close to Hashem. If a person tries to utilize that which Hashem told us not to do and somehow portray that I can get close to Hashem with it anyway, that is something which is so destructive. Now, it's important to note, not to get this wrong. This is brought particularly in certain cases. It's interesting that the Ramban brings this as well when it says you're not allowed to bring a korban, let's say, that is purchased with mechir kelev or esnan zona, with the price of a dog, meaning the money or the price of the money that was used to purchase a dog, and the money which is zona, which a prostitute received for her services. Now, there's so many negative things. Why does the Torah zone in on those two? The Ramban says because both of those are people who are often likely to give money for korbanos, for hekdesh, in order to, so to speak, make up for what they did. In the case of the zona, that's true. She earns money from her customers, and somehow this portrayal, this idea that she can convince herself and then convince others that by using it to bring korbanos, that somehow makes it okay. The Torah wants to see that's not true. The dog, says the Ramban, is that people who train vicious dogs and cause them to attack people and to do wrong things with them, they may also say, okay, the same money with which I bought that dog, I'm going to donate to Hekdesh. That type of thing has to be eliminated. But it's important to note, that doesn't mean that a Jew who did an Avera should therefore not do his next mitzvah. The famous statement from Rav Moshe of Kabrin, he says that a Jew who's done the worst Avera in the world and doesn't know that his obligation now is to do his next mitzvah, hasn't stepped over the threshold of Yiddishkeit. Whatever you've done, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees fit for you to wake up alive in the morning, that means that the Torah applies to you. There's no asterisk in the Torah that says that this is only for tzaddikim. It's for everyone, even for a person who did something wrong. And we never tell a person, unless the Torah specifically tells us, because you did Avera X, don't do Mitzvah Y. There's a fascinating truth in the Igros Moshe of Moshe Feinstein. Someone wrote to him saying that a friend of mine, he says, likes to go out dancing with young women in a way that's forbidden by halacha, and he wears his yarmulke, his kippah, while he does it. Should I tell him to take it off? And Rav Moshe says, no, you never tell a person to stop doing something which is positive according to Torah, even, he says, like a strong minig that Am Yisrael accepted upon themselves, like the idea of covering the head. You never tell a person not to do that. We don't lock a person out of mitzvahs. Here, there's a particular aspect of a person trying to use those wrongly earned funds and say that I can use this to get karov to Hashem, to get close to Hashem. There, the Torah comes and tells us specifically about that. There's another aspect of theft that I found fascinating. It was brought down in the name of a Rebbe called the Rebbe of Nadrazin, who I was not able to track down. I tried looking for a bit. It's brought in a collection of Divrei Torah from Admorim of Poland, and he says like this: Adam ki yakriv mikem. When this individual comes to bring from you, right? It says, just as Adam Harishon didn't steal, so too you don't steal. He says the Torah is hinting to the following: when a person wants to get close to Hashem, he says what he should do should be authentic to him and appropriate to his level. He says, otherwise, a person's often tempted to look at what other people are doing in their Avodas Hashem and to simply imitate it. That which the Navi decries is mitzvahs anoshim milumoda, what we would call monkey see, monkey do. He says that is not the derech in which to be able to illuminate your life with the Or of Hashem. He says in certain ways this is like stealing. This is taking a way of avoda that's not yours, not appropriate for you, and trying to use it to serve Hashem. Your avoda should be mikem, from that which was truly inside each and every one of us, which is authentic to us. Adam Harishon had nobody to copy. Everything Adam Harishon did was authentically his own. So too, we have to learn to try to be authentic in our Avodas Hashem. We can certainly learn from other people who teach us and learn to grow, but not get into this idea of imitation. That's something which does not really bring us close in the way that we authentically are supposed to. He says that's part of what's meant by lo tikruvu min hagezel. Don't bring from that which is stolen. So all of these things apply not just to the world of Korbanos, which hopefully we'll return to with the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, but in all of our Avodas Hashem. Sefer Vayikra has messages upon messages that are applicable to us today. One simply has to look into the words of Chazal, in the Midrashim, and in the Gemara, and the words of our Mefarshim, and able to get those messages and enable us to grow in our Avodas Hashem, just as when they had the Beis HaMikdash. Yitz Hashem, we should be able to see the Beis HaMikdash rebuilt soon. Wishing everyone a wonderful week.